Hello, fellow librarians. Back for LABrary, I see. Thank you for coming. So I am following up from my challenge from last week, where our challenge was to make something strong, something that will hold a lot of weight, but the only two items you got to use were paper and tape. Okay. So, a couple of hints that I gave last week was that, or were, if you look at engineering projects like bridges and that kind of thing, kind of look at the shapes that they use for structures. And we kind of talked about that the strongest shape in nature, or certainly one of the strongest shapes in nature and for engineering, is a triangle. So with that in mind, I thought, well, okay, for my build, I was going to use just 8.5 by 11 paper. And what I decided is I didn't want to cut it all up very much, and so I was just going to make a bunch of rolls of paper. So I rolled it up into columns, which are a lot stronger than any other thing we could do with the paper, really. And then I rolled them pretty tightly, so they weren't going to really bend. And then what I did was I kind of started from there, and I decided I just want to use the paper at the full length. I didn't want to cut it in half or try and bend it or anything. So essentially I created a square and then attached the sides with some tape, and then built kind of like almost like a little bench. So I had a square with 4 legs coming down, and then I did the triangle method where I took paper, and I've got some photos here of kind of what I did, and I made triangles to kind of hold up and brace the sides and the top on all 4 sides. And I did make some cuts so the angle of the paper would kind of fit right in flat. And then I used a ton of tape to put everything together. Almost used a whole roll of like clear plastic tape. And then a couple of other things I did. One of the big worries I had, because I thought about on the bottom, instead of making just legs, about whether I wanted to brace those as well. But I was curious just to see how the triangles would do. So I didn't do that. And then the one thing I was worried about, though, was like, if this was the top of my little bench and here were my legs, that as more weight got pushed out, would the legs on the bottom get pushed out and collapse? So I kind of wrapped the whole thing in tape, hoping that would kind of hold everything together. And as I say, did a lot of taping. So I have some pictures here of how that worked. It worked pretty well. I was sturdily able to put like more than 75 pounds on it. I put a big tub that weighed about 50 pounds, had about 50 pounds of stuff, and then I piled some other stuff on there. So then I decided to do the ultimate test. The LABrarian test, where I decided I was going to stand on the thing. So here's a video of how that worked. Okay, so here's my standing on my paper and tape scaffolding. I did it kind of once before, and it kind of crushed parts of it, so it may collapse, but I'm going to try it anyway. So I'm taking a lot of weight up here. Okay, I'm going to let go. But it held it for a couple of seconds. I know what probably could have helped it, but cool. Okay, so as you saw, it did hold me there for a second, but it did collapse. So here is my collapsed my collapsed bench. So a couple of the things that happened that I noticed. It did hold me for a second. What really collapsed the whole thing wasn't so much, it was a little bit of the bottoms trying to come out, but really what happened is that there was a torsion between the top here where the whole thing wasn't stable enough to not do this. So it kind of started angling like that, and once that happened, all the proportions were off and the whole thing just collapsed on me. So you can see it compacted all the paper. I did put a little book on here so I could stand on something. But again, so one of the big things that the failures, if I was going to redo that, which is always the thing with LABrary and whenever you're doing making, is observing, testing, and then redesigning. So redesigning, I would think about a way to combat the idea of the torsion, that once it gets really heavy, how am I going to stop it from moving this way? I also got to think about how to stop it this way, so I really needed some more brace, some ways to brace it, and whether that would be maybe building an actual bottom, like the top here, maybe that would help from it turning, maybe even doing some bracing in the middle to kind of keep it from moving back and forth. I don't know. I would have to test it, that kind of thing, but that's really, from what I could feel as it collapsed under my weight, and just seeing how, in what state my little bench is in right now, what happened. So as you can see, I have a bunch of paper. I rolled it all up into rolls, and then I did a lot of taping. So other sort of a structural weak point is like the edges here, they don't stand on anything, they're just sort of taped together with a lot of tape. But again, I was hoping that I'd counter that by bracing it with the triangles, which did actually work pretty well. So that was my attempt. I hope you guys had fun, and we look forward to our next challenge. Thanks, everyone!